Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to bid farewell to the Rebel of the Sands trilogy. As we delicately unhaul it from the shelves, we're going to look back on some of the good times I've had with this trilogy, and some of the reasons why I'm no longer keeping it on my shelves. As you watch another episode of Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelf, because at this point, it's genuinely saving me shelf space. I don't know what that was. Welcome. You're watching another episode of Overbooked. We're talking about Rebel of the Sands trilogy. Let's go. So some quick disclaimers before we start. I believe I bought every single book in this series myself. I don't think any of them were sent to me. I'm pretty sure I might have had a review copy of Hero at the Fall, but it was quite a long time ago and I can't remember. Regardless of where books are coming from, nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I'm also going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible while still talking about the full trilogy as a whole. So if you do want to go into this series knowing absolutely nothing while you're watching a review video, pause this video, click away, come back when you've read them, we'll have a chat about it then. I like the idea of you leaving this video on pause the whole time you read like 3 quite chunky YAs. It'll be fine. Rebel of the Sands, this book here, first published in 2016, which was right about when I was starting getting back into reading. In fact, so much so that I can remember the hype around the third book coming out and debating whether or not I was like a cool enough book person to go to the book launch event in London. Now I would just go. Well, I wouldn't go because I'm unhauling the series, but at this point I would just go. But it's nice to remember those times where it's like, oh, do I count enough? It was a paid event. I could have just chosen to go. It's fairly indicative of that time period, kind of 2016 to 2018 YA, which I think will be a good example of why I've decided to unhaul it from my shelves. But it might be an excellent selling point for you if that is your sweet spot for reading. Alwyn Hamilton is best known for writing this series. She is, I believe, Canadian, but she's lived sort of all over Europe, quite frequently found in France. I followed her on Instagram for a time, I don't anymore, but she has exceptional taste in dresses. I'm just going to say it. Alwyn, if you're watching this, can I borrow your wardrobe? As far as I'm aware, she hasn't written anything other than this series, although her next series, The Notorious Virtues, is meant to come out at some point. I have seen a cover for that, but I don't think I've seen a pub date. Just a recap for you. Book 1, Rebel of the Sands. Book 2, Traitor to the Throne. Book 3, Hero at the Fall. That's the order you read them in. It's not one of those ones where you can kind of shuffle it around. It's a full narrative throughout. I would describe this as a desert fantasy meets more of a gunslinger kind of setting story. We've got this sharpshooting heroine in this kind of, I don't think it's frontier town is the word I'm looking for, but this kind of place where they manufacture things, and but we've also got djinn powers happening at the same time, so it's a combination of those things. To steal from the blurb, Rebel of the Sands reveals what happens when a dream deferred explodes in the fires of rebellion, of romantic passion, and the all-consuming inferno of a girl finally, at long last, embracing her power. Which is a very dramatic way of saying, like, it's a YA fantasy plot from 2016. One of the reasons I actually really like this series, and one of the reasons I would have to keep it, is that Amani, our main character, is a fun character to follow. She is a YA heroine in the best possible way, I think. Like, she falls in love, she has a great time, she's really good at one specific thing, and it's not archery, it's shooting, but, you know, go off, she's great. That would be a spoiler if I talked about it, but there is a YA heroine trope thing that happens to her in the first book. There is something I find very comforting about that. I think that we could talk about Not Like Other Girls, and we could talk about strong female protagonists until the cows come home. But there is a reason these books sell well. These Amani characters sell books, and I think that what I like about her is her wit and her gumption, I suppose, is the best way to put it. I really like her dialogue, I like her voice, I like reading her. Is this first person? Yes, it is. This is first person narrative. I talked about it in my Little Thieves review. It's not my favourite thing, but I like being inside Amani's head. I think she's cool, and she is one of those people where teenage me would have thought she was even cooler than adult me does. This may be a selling point or a negative point, depending on your opinion of stories, but this is definitely a series where over the course of the 3 books, you fall for the characters, you fall in love with them, you root for their relationships, and you have your heart stomped on at various different points in the story. And I think that I'll come on to a bit more about my feelings on that later, but if that is something you really enjoy, if you want to fall in love with a full cast of characters, this is a really good series for that, which I wasn't expecting when I first picked it up. And when I did a reread of this late last year to prep for these videos, I think that one of the things that surprised me was I'd really thought of it as a Amani and love interest kind of story, and actually there's far more going on than I would have thought, and I think that's sort of evident in the difference in size. Rebel of the Sands is very small, Hero at the Fall is quite chunky by the end of it. It's not enormous, but it is there, and I think that speaks to how much Alwyn Hamilton really expands who we're talking about in this story, and this isn't just one character having an effect on the world. And I think that I like that as, again, an expansion of what YA was doing from 2016 to 2018, and it began, I think, to look much more at how people change the world as opposed to how a person changes the world. Djinn powers are just kind of cool is what I've written. I like anything that has magical powers, and that does feature in these books. I'm not going to talk too much about how, because I think it comes into vague spoiler territory. The magic in this series is very interesting, and I like the different ways in which it appears in the series. I like the rules and constraints put on it. I like how it integrates with science and technology. I just think there is some cool stuff going on. However, having said all of that good stuff about this series, they are not staying on my shelves. Now that the series is complete, I've read them all twice now, I am going to unhaul them and pass them on to a new home. I talked about this in... Oh, it's not up yet, but I have an upcoming vlog where I talk about this, so I can talk about it now and it won't be repeating myself. Really seeing yourself more as a custodian. This is a little bit wanky. A custodian of the objects you possess rather than an owner of them. I think it is time for this series to go and be loved by someone else, so I'm going to pass it on. We have a few charity shops near us who are still taking books, and I might just see if anyone wants it. If you would like these, let me know. And that's partly because they are becoming a little bit dated, I think, especially the first book. I think it's very evident this is where YA was at that point, and that, again, might be a huge selling point for you. That might be exactly what you want. I'm kind of in a place where the YA that I enjoy is a little bit different from that, or it's even more leaning into the tropey goodness than this is. And I think I'm just not quite in the place where this story really hits me anymore. I think there are better desert fantasies out there, but also I'm just not reading a lot of desert fantasy YA at the moment. It's not my jam. I also think that towards the end, towards Hero at the Fall, maybe even towards the end of Traitor to the Throne, I got a little bit fatigued in general, but specifically with this series, it felt a little bit like, ooh, look at me, I'm the big meanie author stamping on your favourites, and a little bit kill your darlings in the literal sense of like, I'm just going to kill people, and isn't it going to feel terrible for you? And I don't think that killing off a character has to serve plot. I don't think it's necessary. I think sometimes people just die in a story with stakes as high as these. But for me, I just got a little bit like, okay, I get it, I'm meant to be super, super attached to this person, and I sort of, like, just in my personality, I go really against that. I'm like, I'm not going to care. I'm not going to care that happened. And I think that that's possibly not the healthiest thing in my own self, probably, but it put me off doing a reread of the series multiple times. And my final reason that I am not keeping this on my shelf, this is all personal preference, is that I don't think that they scratch the same itch after multiple readings. Now, if you have been watching for a while, you will know my big reason for keeping a book. The reason I will hold on to a book on my shelves is, do I want to reread it? And in this case, I've done a reread of these, and I have to say I didn't get much more out of them a second time around. I think knowing what happens, having a sense of where characters end up, I don't get enjoyment out of the act of reading them. I like the story, they're not something I want to read again. So if that's something that you like to bear in mind when you're thinking about spending money on books, if you're also looking for something that you're going to want to have around for a while, not because of sentimental value or because of other reasons, but because it's something you want to read again and again, I don't think this book is a particularly rereadable series for me personally. Though I will say, of all of them, I think my favourite is still Rebel of the Sands. I think there's something about that book that just captures probably the most tropey YA stuff, which is what I enjoy about the series, and it doesn't go different enough from that later on that I'm like, oh, okay, this did something different. So it just feels a bit like it almost gets over the edge, but not quite. That's just my feelings. Have I said it's my personal opinion enough? Some other things you might want to read if this is something you're into. I was thinking about more gunslinging books, and obviously Spellslinger came up in my mind. This is by Sebastian de Castell. This features this same kind of setting, this blending of magic and sort of Western cowboys kind of frontier stuff into one book. I have a full series reading vlog up for that, I think. Or it's a whole review. I honestly can't remember. I've made too many videos at this point, but I will link that somewhere. We Hunt the Flame is another one I thought about. This actually wasn't for me. I think I've talked about this recently, but I'm a little bit burned out on dual point of view YA, so it just wasn't exactly what I needed, but I have had friends read it who've really, really enjoyed it, and I think I would be remiss not to recommend it at this point. And the last thing I wondered about is Mirage, which is a North African-inspired sci-fi book, which, bear with me, there are various plot reasons I think this book is similar, and the plot is from book 2 of this series, so I don't think I want to talk about it too much, but I really enjoy Mirage. I think it's a really good read, and I don't recommend it enough, so I will quietly plonk that onto your want-to-read shelves. There you go. You're welcome. Read Mirage. With all that said, I think that this is a really good series to read once, or maybe read twice even, but for me, they just do not have the same kind of staying power that they once did, and frankly, I live in a house with very limited bookshelf space, despite these wonderful things that you can see behind me, and I think it is time for these to go to a much nicer home, someone who will cherish them, and maybe then even pass them on. So we're saying farewell to the person I was when I read and enjoyed these books, and to these books themselves. Thank you so much for being in my life. It's time to go. Hooray. Have you read these? What are your thoughts? Is it sacrilege that I'm unhauling them? Is it even worse that I've hung onto them through a house move just so I could film this video? A little bit. I probably should have unhauled them before. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. There's more good stuff coming. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord. We have a wonderful time. There are pictures of dogs there. Why not? That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. Sidebar. Should I do another brutal book purge this year? Because I do have enough room on my shelves for all my books currently, especially if we're unhauling 3 of them. But it is starting to feel a bit like I've got more stuff that I want to reread. Do I need to wait until I'm back in a YA phase, or do we assume I will never be back in a YA phase again? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know. It's gonna be some bloopers now. Oh, I did it again. I've done the thing again where I forgot to look at my notes before I started. Good times I've had with this trilogy. Thank you, Luna. Oh, this is going to be a nightmare to fit on this shelf. Ow. I got a little bit... Ooh.